I would do it again.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode.
So, Cornback Kings Talk.
I'm your host, Reed.
And it is time for That's So Kings, the podcast.
And let's hop into this
Podcast.
for real.
Before we start this That's So Kings, the podcast episode on YouTube, this is going to be a YouTube exclusive clip. I don't know if this side or this side, there's going to be a date and timestamp on the YouTube version. And it might be distracting. I'm just using a different camera. And that's basically it. Now let's go to the video.
Hello and welcome back to That's So Kings podcast, a podcast where I talk Kings hockey for a good portion of time. This episode we're taking a look at two trade trees that scratch your head. And it's involving Marian Gaborik and Milan Lucic in two separate deals. They don't tie is what I'm trying to say. So let's get started. Hit the prayer switch and let's go. Before we get in, I want to say thank you to all who's joining us on audio or on video on YouTube or on audio the day before, as in Apple, Spotify, Google Play, TuneIn, Deezer, all those. Hello, Kings fans. Welcome back to episode 6 of That's So Kings podcast. I'm your host for a short amount of time. Whether you're listening audio-wise on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, iHeart, hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, same with Pandora with that, TuneIn, Alexa, Deezer, or anyone else that I forgot to mention, Stitcher, that's a big one. Thank you for listening. Or if you're on YouTube the day after the audio comes out, hey, that's okay too. I'm just happy that you're joining me for this time frame. So I have two trade trees for you, two separate things. Both have the same premise. What and why and head scratching for my audio friends. Head scratching. So let's hit the prayer switch and let's hop right into the evidence. Marian Gaborik was traded from the Columbus Blue Jackets to the Los Angeles Kings in the late winter of 2014. That helped us get our second cup in 3 years. Going to Columbus was Matt Fratton, who was not very serviceable. He played some games, but he was not with us a lot. He was just bouncing from the AHL and the NHL. A 2015 second that Columbus used to package with another pick to get a first-round pick that became Gabriel Carlson. That team that got the second was Toronto, and they used it on Travis Dermott, and there was another pick that hasn't amounted to anything. That third-round pick that went to Columbus was in 2014. That actually went to Detroit for 2/3. Columbus used one of those thirds on one of their current goalies, Elvis Merzlikins. And Detroit has used it on a guy who I believe is still in the AHL. If not, he hasn't made a big imprint on the league. So, if you looked at Gaborik as solely a rental and you didn't factor in the contract section, great deal. I'm okay sacrificing a little bit if it ends up being in the championship. There's some deals, like the one that we're going to talk about later with Lucic, that you have your finger on the pulse and you're like, what? Or the Andre Sekera deal in that same year as the Lucic deal. You mortgaged a little too much. So, Brian ended up flipping to Toronto, and that goes into another trade that we have, and that goes into the Dion Phaneuf trade, the first one that goes from Toronto, Ottawa, and and then that trade is kind of convenient because Marian Gaborik and Nick Shore get traded to Ottawa for Phaneuf and center Nate Thompson, one of the few players from Alaska. And we know how Dion's tenure with the Kings ended, bought out, and he's on the books for, I believe, 4 more years after, including this now dead year. since the regular season is now over due to all this coronavirus. So 3 more after this one. Thompson was later flipped to Montreal for a 4th, which became a Finnish defenseman named Kim. I'm not trying to pronounce that last name. I'm going to butcher it. Let me just put it that way. Then Montreal flipped Thompson again to Philly for a 2021 5th. So that trade tree branch still lives on, but in a different realm. Gaborik is still on the books in Ottawa. I guess they need his cap hit, and he's just chilling back home. Just long-term IL, I guess. So Nick Shore was then flipped immediately to Calgary for a 7th. That 7th was actually flipped to Columbus with Ryan Dzingel for Anthony Duclair in 2 seconds. And those 2 seconds Columbus has, one is in 2020, which is this future draft this year, I hope, and a 2021, which will happen after this one. So nothing hasn't been produced yet out of that trade except for the resurgence of Anthony Duclair. So my thoughts on this is that it's a big wash, this trade. It's nice looking in hindsight that we got rid of the deadweight. And if we didn't sign Gaborik, I'd be okay with that actually, looking back in hindsight. But hindsight is 20/20, and you probably are in the GM shoes at the time saying, oh, he was a key factor in our 2014 Cup run, so we gotta pay him his dues, and I guess they were right. But 7 years? Even I knew that was bad, and that was not too... And I knew that was not crazy, super crazy. I was just crazy about hockey at that time. So, now let's jump, I believe, a year later, a year later to the Milan Lucic trade. It actually happened in the 2015 draft, and the Kings were picking 13th before the deal, and I would be okay, looking back, I would have been okay with a Matt Barzal, Brock Besser, Jake DeBrusk. These were players at that selection that was available. But I guess they saw Lucic and they saw their team now saying, hey, let's keep going, let's keep playing playoff hockey. And that was the 1 year that we did make the playoffs and then got just demolished by San Jose in the playoffs in 5 games. And San Jose went to the Cup final and lost. Well, San Jose had some key piece in that deal, actually. Original trade was the Milan Lucic at 50% retained salary. That's why you could afford him. For the first round pick, the 13th overall pick to Boston, which became Jakub Zboril, who is still in the AHL, I believe, in Providence, Martin Jones, and Colin Miller. Martin Jones was obviously flipped to San Jose for a 2016 first, and Sean Corrali. Corrali's still a fourth-line grit grinder with Boston, and that first-round pick, Trent Frederick, is still in their system. He's not bad, but Jones obviously helped San Jose get to that Cup final and had a pretty good year the year after, and then just, did he get the yips or something? He just stopped being good, and has a not so great contract. So that's more of a San Jose thing to deal with and all that. But Colin Miller was then taken by Vegas in the expansion draft, and he did all right, had a pretty good year, and scored Vegas' first Cup final goal, I believe, in Game 1. So, due to cap constraints, yes, an expansion team already having cap constraints. Wow, this is unprecedented, of course, because that's a whole nother video, expansion draft. I'm going to dogtail that. I believe, to just levity contract space, Colin Miller was then traded to Buffalo for a 2021 second, which was St. Louis's from the Ryan O'Reilly deal, and Buffalo's own fifth going to Vegas. That 2021 St. Louis second was then packaged back to us with a 2020 Vegas for Alec Martinez, which is not bad actually, thinking about it, and only a few months in hindsight. You get two possibly guaranteed NHL players for a player that was on the decline and needed to be on a championship winning roster. I'm okay with that. And yeah, there's other components of both trades that you can argue that is that really part of it? Well, it changed a bit. I am considering this Colin Miller picking up by Vegas and the expansion draft thing still part of the trade sheet because he didn't leave in free agency. So it's more like a catch-22 thing or a little asterisk. I don't know. What I do know is a great trade turned meh trade at the time turned into a beneficiary to us right now. And the reason why we didn't sign Lucic after that not so great playoff exit at the hands of the Sharks is that before December or the New Year, when Kopitar's extension came through, Kopitar and Lucic were two prize free agent UFAs going out, and the greatest saying is you don't sign big number one centers. On the open market, they don't usually get there, and it's true. We signed him around New Year's, and that's how he got that $10 million 8-year deal. Just worth it, actually. He had a Hart Trophy year almost. The year that we lost to Vegas. So I think it was probably a good idea that we kept Kopitar and not Lucic. And as you see, Lucic is out of the trade tree, but he's still bumbling and stumbling up in Alberta. So both of these trades, both the Gaborik trade and the Gaborik trades and the Lucic deal, helped us in the short term, but long term it's actually financially helped us. Granted, buying out Phaneuf was probably a big reason why, due to the fact that we wanted to go young, but I would do it again. That is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to this audio, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeart, hopefully, Pandora, hopefully, TuneIn, which you can go to your Alexa and say, "Hey Alexa, play That's So Kings the podcast." I don't know what happens next, but hopefully you can hear my voice. And you can do it, hopefully, we're definitely on Google Play, and hopefully if you have a Google Home or Google Home Mini, you can say, "Hey Google, play That's So Kings the podcast," and possibly you can hear my voice. Also, Stitcher, good. If you're on there, thank you. Deezer, all the good stuff. Or heck, if you're even on Buzzsprout, just listening straight up. Download the podcast and all that. It'd be great. And YouTube, getting back to you. Like and subscribe, share the link, turn on post notifications, because part of the notification squads. That's all I got. Hopefully, in the next episode, when there is one, I'll talk about something cool. I'll see you whenever the next video comes out. Goodbye.